Hey everyone, do we need more space junk up there? You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi everyone, it's Alan Schemmel. Happy Tuesday to you. You know, we've got a distinct theme for today's show. It's a space theme. Two of our three blocks are on space related. Actually, all three blocks at some level are on space and you know, that kind of thing. But should be a fun show. Let me introduce you quickly to our gang members for today. And we've got some great ones. First of all, he's back home with his guitars in Colorado, Futurum VP Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, welcome.
It's the real guitars too, not faked. I was asked many times at RSA, where's your guitars? Where's the guitars?
It's just a background. Anyway, good to have you, Mitch. Good to see you. Then joining us still in Ohio. Well, he's moved, but he's moved still within Hudson, I guess. He is Tech Field Day CEO, Stephen Foskett. Hey, Stephen, how you doing?
It's good to be here. Yes, all settled in. You know, just looking at the stars from a new point of view.
Yep. 3.2 miles will do that to you, I guess, huh?
Yeah, really.
Okay. And then joining us, he had his fix for the Yankees on Sunday. He's back to work today. He's our Chief Content Officer, Mike Rizard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm well. I'm licking my wounds here in New York. 2 out of 3 lost to Tampa.
I know. And Tampa Bay's not what they were either. Mm-hmm. But look, you die by the home run, you live by the home run, and we need high average hitters. Though Paul Goldschmidt and Aaron Judge's batting averages are ridiculous. They're both flirting with 400. It's the rest of the
we need those bigger torpedo bats, you know, and just make them like 8 inches bigger on the barrel.
That's just what we need. That's just what we need. All right, let's jump into things today, though. Mike, you know, look, competition's a good thing, and quite frankly, Starlink has been I think first it was looked at as an oddity, but certainly as we've seen, let's say in the Ukraine-Russian war, it's a strategic asset. But it's never a good thing to have just one provider. What do we got here?
So Amazon has finally put up 27 of these Kuiper satellites, and they're on their way to deploying 300 or more of them. And of course, Jeff Bezos has been driving behind Blue Origin now for a while, and that's had some mixed successes. But we clearly can't be overly dependent upon one company, Starlink, to provide these satellites, and NASA's kind of having its budget cut a little bit, so there's going to be some strategic issues on top of that. But it's clear that, you know, some of the folks who own these companies have used their influence as a result to change policies in a way, or to maybe insert their noses in places where it doesn't really belong. But Alan, I know you follow the space pretty closely. What is happening here with all these satellites, and how does it play into our larger geopolitical discussions?
Sure. Well, I will say that, you know, for the longest time, Starlink was sort of like DirecTV. I got cable. I don't know, you know, unless I live somewhere out in the boonies that don't have cable, then maybe I need satellite. But, you know, as I said earlier in the lead-in, with the advent of the Ukrainian-Russian war, stuff in the Middle East, Starlink, you know, satellite communication, satellite internet, I think has become strategic. And you're right, to have it in the hands of one man, even though he may be a stable genius or not, is concerning, right? It's concerning here in the US because what happens when the next president isn't someone he gave $300 million to elect? And it doesn't go his way, and it's been known to have a tantrum or two. And put yourself outside the U.S. Would you trust him with anything strategic in your country after what he's done on the world stage? Of course not. So I think it's a really smart move here by Jeff Bezos, and quite frankly, Blue Origin can't exist just to take celebrities for quick little joyrides to the upper atmosphere and down again, including Captain Kirk. But so this is a mission for Blue Origin. But you said something else, Mike, that I think is really at the heart of this here. They want to cut NASA's budget and in essence privatize our space program, which has been on the agenda for a long time. But the way they're talking about privatizing it now, it's going to one company, right? SpaceX. We need strategically in this country, we need an alternative. You can't have all your eggs in that basket. We'll wind up launching astronauts out of the Cosmodrome again in Kazakhstan or wherever the heck it is, right? And in terms of the rest of the world, if you're Japan or India or any of the Western, the EU countries or Brazil or, any country that wants to have a place in this next century, you need a space program today. You're going to need that, whether it's launching satellites, defending against spaceborne weaponization, or just pure science and exploration, as we're going to have in our B block, right? Some of the science. These are strategic assets, right? We chose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And that makes the mettle of a country. Now, granted, we may not do this as a country anymore. We do it as corporations because we live in the era of proxies. These corps are proxies. They're their own governments in some way, their own entities, nation states, whatever, corp states. But if you're going to have corp states, you need competition. So I think it's a good thing and more power to it. But the space junk issue bums me out. How long until these things collide, and when they run out of juice, are they going to burn up in the atmosphere, and what does that do? And if they don't burn in the atmosphere, are they going to land in Hudson, Ohio? Poor Steven just got a new house. Does he need a satellite crashing in?
I think we're already playing space junk dodgeball up there. I think the International Space Station had him use its thrusters to get out of the way of some satellite junk that was coming their way, and they were like afraid it was going to hit it. But Stephen, I want to ask you, how strategic are these satellite networks really going to be, and what kind of throughput do I see? I mean, am I just using this because when there's a war on, I need to call in some missiles, or is this going to have more commercial purposes?
Well, I think certainly this has commercial applications. It also has military and other applications, as Alan said. I mean, there's a sort of a strategic aspect to it as well. One of the things, it's easy and fun to dunk on Elon Musk, and we might do that a little bit more in this show. But that being said, Starlink actually works really, really well. It is up, it is operational, people rely on it. And that has, I think, opened the door to other challengers. So we've got the OneWeb constellation. There's a constellation from China that's going to be even bigger that is going up now. I do think as Americans, as international people as well, would like to have an alternative to Starlink, just given the sort of political situation with Musk and the U.S. administration. But that being said, how many of these things do we really need? And that is my concern. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of small satellites up there. It's important to know too that these things are at different levels, different orbits. I don't think that the Starlink satellites have caused any issues in terms of people having to dodge them, except on the ground when they come out of the sky, because they're kind of designed to do that. But at the same time, eventually it becomes pretty crowded. And we've had issues already with the satellites crowding out, observatories, just people trying to enjoy the night sky, that sort of thing, because these things, there's a lot of them. And Amazon's adding more. The other thing I'll point out too is that, yes, they launched these things, but they only launched a few of them. They're way, way behind Starlink in terms of deployment here, and there's no telling whether they will be able to catch up. One of the things, some of the coverage that I've been looking at suggests that these Kuiper satellites, they're using a more traditional sort of Pez dispenser way of launching. That means that there's less space on the rockets to launch the satellites, which means that they're going to need more rockets in order to launch more satellites than SpaceX or the Chinese competitor, which use sort of a flat pack and then adjust launch mechanism. And what that means is that this whole project is, I don't want to say doomed to failure, but it's questionable whether they will be able to achieve their goals, given the fact that Starlink and the Chinese are already so far ahead technologically. We'll see what happens here, but I'm not all that optimistic that Kuiper is going to be able to achieve its goals.
Yeah. I was just going to say I know a lot of private weather companies and in the past few years have been investing in their own satellites. So you're getting more, I guess, congestion as well from the weather aspect of it.
As far as the Kuiper system by Bezos and Blue Origin, he's not going to fold Blue Origin. And this is the reason, the only reason, other than the celebrity flybys, it's the only thing they're doing. And I think he envisions a time where he will compete with SpaceX for NASA type missions, whether it's going to Mars, Moon, what have you. And they need these launches and so forth will give them the experience, practical experience that they're going to need if they want to get into the commercial space business.
I think if you just look at the goods delivery business, if you want to call Amazon that, relying on cellular networks, as I'm sure those trucks do today, that's a very unreliable way of communicating as those are traveling around and delivering goods. I think there's a huge advantage to Amazon to be able to have
his best customer.
Instant fleet access to everything. You know exactly where it is, and you've got GPS coordinates. You've got the satellite connection. The other thing, the one thing I'm really excited about Starlink, though, is United Airlines announced they're changing their Wi-Fi to Starlink. I can't wait, because Wi-Fi on planes is pretty bad. So, first world problem, I know, but that I'm excited about. Other than that, Starlink's to the average person is kind of a nothing burger, at least today. I think it's more global companies, countries, militaries, things like that it's important to.
Stephen, are you getting ready to move to Starbase and run for city council? I mean, they got a whole name of the town here in Texas.
Well, there's a lot of controversy there. That's for sure. My friends in Texas, I would be remiss to not bring up their concerns over the fact that SpaceX has been building their Starbase launch complex, and now the city into something pretty big down there on the Gulf Coast, and a lot of folks on the Gulf Coast aren't all that happy with it. I think a lot of the people out in the Gulf and out in the Atlantic are not all that happy about it either. But frankly, if we're going to have a space program, we need to be able to launch them from places, and the closer to the equator and the closer to the ocean they are, the better the logistics are for launch. And so I guess that's that. I mean, you could, again, make a case that SpaceX has brought a lot of commercial prospects to this. One of the things about this whole Starbase city concept that I'm a little nervous about is that as you know, there's been a push among Silicon Valley elites to create sort of new free cities with limited legal requirements and so on. And I know that that's something that we've seen happen in Austin. Elon Musk has tried to build a company town there. They're trying to build a company town here at Spaceport or Starbase. This is a little bit concerning. We'll see what's exactly is going to happen.
It goes back to what I said, Stephen. It's the era of corp states, right? These corporations are independent entities that are, and they are corp towns, right? We had corp towns in mining areas earlier on, and it worked out real well.
We still have Midland, Michigan, you could argue, is a
Yeah.
corp town.
Let's face it, Walt Disney pioneered this model, right? I mean, he's probably the most successful example of that with Disney World. And of course, that even led to
Really, Lake Buena Vista,
Buena Vista, to
right?
controversy between the town, the city, the whatever it is.
What is it? Reedy
And the
Creek,
state, the
right? The
government.
Reedy Creek Development Corporation, something
Right.
like that.
That's the core that developed, but the entity.
So-
But look, this is a bigger issue than Disney World, though. This is not that Disney World's not strategic. I don't mean to insult all my Mickey and Minnie friends out there. But this is a very strategic asset here you're talking about, where if Elon Musk has a hissy fit, the United States doesn't have a space program. I'm not
It's also
willing
a
to
very
put my eggs in
powerful
those
asset.
baskets.
It's not only strategic, Alan, it's a very powerful asset, right? That could, Elon decides he wants to favor the Chinese or whoever, owns the town in whatever one of these corporate entity towns. Yeah, they can shift allegiances and alliances where they want.
So, Alan, close this out for a minute, though. You mentioned NASA, and there's been a new budget proposed, and it cuts the budget in a lot of key areas and wants to refocus our efforts on Mars and all this other stuff that Elon's been kind of banging the drum about. Is NASA basically too inefficient to handle any of this, and we're just going to privatize everything, or what would be the
It's not
role
that
of
NASA's too inefficient. NASA did a hell of a job getting us to the moon and everything else they've done. Like any government entity, is it the most efficient thing in the world? No. But make no mistake, this budget for NASA is an out-and-out private, the same way we've privatized jails, schools, immigration. The people who are grabbing people off the street are probably part of some Blackstone or whatever the company is, not Blackstone, excuse me, whatever the company is that they hire for soldiers, mercenaries. This is replacing our government space program and privatizing it to Elon Musk. And it's a mistake. And you're right, Elon's done great. Out of all the companies he's been involved with, SpaceX has done great stuff. You got to give credit there. But you can't put all your eggs in this basket. We need Blue Origin. We need competition in space if we're going to go on the private side of the thing. But again, we go to the moon not because it's easy. This is a hard thing where it takes nation states to do it. China's going to do it, right? Other countries are going to do it. This can't be a company thing. It has to be a country thing. And that's the last I'll say on it. Let's take a break. You're watching Techstrong Gang. We've got more space for you, though.
Welcome back to the Techstrong Gang. Well, to keep with the theme of space, we're doing a special tribute this block because NASA's Hubble Space Telescope is 35 years old. Time flies. And looking back at the mission and the accomplishments is really remarkable. I took a closer look and, and compared it a little bit to some of the work that we emphasize here on the show about IT practices, like refreshing, updates, longer life cycles. Believe it or not, it's all connected. Plus, Hubble and the incredible work the scientists associated with have done really are at a lot of the roots of stuff that we also talk about, like AI and cloud computing. So let's take a look at that video. The Hubble Space Telescope just turned 35. For tech enthusiasts, Its legacy blends astronomical discovery with groundbreaking innovation. Launched in 1990 to capture clearer views of space than ever before, NASA's pioneering observatory marked a new era of what technology could achieve in orbit. To celebrate Hubble's anniversary, NASA shared stunning new images, from frosty Martian clouds to distant, faraway galaxies. With 1.7 million observations and over 22,000 scientific papers, Hubble is the most productive telescope in history. So how has Hubble lasted 35 years? Adaptability. Over its lifetime, it's been upgraded by astronauts 5 times, replacing worn-out parts, adding cutting-edge instruments, and extending its capabilities. Hubble's mission has shaped more than science. It sparked open data and imaging tools that drive everything from AI to medical tech. Hubble's story is an important reminder that in space and in tech, the next great discovery may be just over the horizon. It was really remarkable to research this and look at the 5 missions over the course of 35 years of the different astronauts that have gone to service Hubble. You can see the difference on the NASA.gov. You can see all the images that were released. But even just looking at the way the astronauts looked is so different from the 90s to today.
Yeah, it really was. You know, I was telling Bonnie before we were live today, when my kids were little, you know, living in Florida, going up to the Kennedy Space Center is, it's better than going to Disney World, in my opinion. But so I took them there one time, and we spent the day in space camp, and then we had what they call lunch with an astronaut. And our astronaut for lunch was, I want to say Corey Overstreet or Corey something like that.
Right.
Well, my kids were 5 and 7 years old. They were more interested in their PB&J sandwiches. I, on the other hand, was I was a mess. I couldn't talk. I was in such awe of this astronaut. You know, you talk about the right stuff. He had a law degree, a medical degree, a PhD in engineering. He had it all. And he flew, I think, 3 or 4 shuttle missions, including the first repair of the Hubble. Yeah. Remember when they had to replace that lens and give it glasses or whatever? And another repair as well. You know, back to the previous session or the pre-section, that's part of NASA's mission. It's the pure science, the learning that we've gotten. Look, over 35 years, we've gotten our money's worth out of Hubble, right? This thing's been out there for 35 years, sending back pictures of things we've never seen before in ways we've never seen it, and so expanded our understanding of the cosmos, right? When you go to privatization and with a profit motive for everything you're doing, pure science like this loses out, right? We've got the James Webb Telescope, the successor to Hubble. There's another one that's built and ready to launch that is now, with this NASA budget, on the chopping block. Huh. Why the hell would you invest all of that money to build this next gen telescope and then decide not to launch it so Elon can send some craziness up or whatever? It makes no sense.
One of the fascinating things about Hubble, Alan, is I believe it was only designed and intended to be operational for 15 years. And of course, reaching it to 35, it's a great example of, you think about embedded systems and, you know, talk about putting things into space and satellites, and you can't go up there and fix it. Well, you actually can in some ways. But the engineering involved not only in creating Hubble, but also designing the systems to maintain it and upgrade it and add improvements to it.
But a lot of that, Mitch,
platform.
A lot of that in the original plan, there wasn't the plans to upgrade it. This was sort of like Apollo 13 kind of, yes, we can, let's, you know, build it and figure it out. That's what makes NASA great. That's what makes NASA great. What makes NASA great is you have satellites on the fringes of the solar system, probably outside the heliosphere right now, that were never designed for that mission, but are still sending back telemetry. what is it, 40 years after, 50 years after they were launched.
Voyager and all that.
Voyager 1 and 2. And there's more heading out. That's what having a science-oriented space program is about, right?
This is you touched on this, but this is the part that I am really worried about. It's NASA and all these government agencies, DoD and whatever, invest in research and technologies that they wind up sharing with a lot of companies, and that creates an ecosystem of technology companies that wind up taking those things to market. And it's not just one company that does it. And NASA will do things that don't have an ROI that would pass any Wall Street muster. But if I looked at the total benefit to society and all the companies they create, it's huge and it's core to how we operate. But I don't know, Stephen, I mean, can we do this stuff with a privatization model, or are we going to lose something here?
Well, I think that my concern is, if you look at the failures of space and the failures of NASA over the last couple of decades, I put the blame squarely on the feet of the politicians and corporations who have transformed NASA from basically as Alan has said, a goal for the nation, into essentially a jobs program and a for-profit or a cash cow. Let's not say for-profit, let's say cash cow. If you look at what's wrong with most of what NASA has been forced to do for the last couple of decades, most of that is because the Congress has forced them into this position of becoming a jobs program for states, for companies. And these companies have put together all these cost plus programs where they're fleecing the government. SLS is the biggest boondoggle ever and should be canceled. I mean, I'm not a big fan of what the Elon Musk and the Doge crew are doing, but I'm also not blind to the fact that SLS has been a complete waste. And frankly, if you look at most of what NASA has been doing for the last few decades, it has been a complete waste. Elon Musk was right in looking at space and saying, this is way over budget, it's way over specified, it's not what we should be doing. What we need to be doing is having a slimmer and more efficient and more goals-oriented, more science-oriented space program. The problem is, if we give it to Elon Musk, well, then that's not that solution either. I don't know what the right solution is, but basically making it a 50-state jobs program that costs billions of dollars per launch ain't it.
So the problem with NASA, and I think it's been a problem since the Apollo mission failed, was what's next. The shuttles in and of themselves were supposed to be an intermediate step. They were the workhorse to carry stuff up to space, to build what's next. The fact, and we're all of an age here except you, Bonnie, the fact that we're still sitting here as little boys, except, well, obviously you were not a little boy. The fact that we're all sitting here that as little boys, we watched men land on the moon. And we haven't gone back. You didn't watch, Stephen?
I'm too young. I missed it.
Did you really?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize
I look
that.
old, but I'm not as old as I look.
All right, I'm sorry you missed it. But Mike,
watched
Mitch, we watched that. And if
It
you
was,
would
the,
have
you know,
asked,
it was the little grainy black and white photos.
it was grainy black and white. I remember him hitting the golf ball. If you would have asked 10-year-old Alan Schimmel, are we going to go back to the moon between now and the time you're 60? Hell yeah. The fact that we haven't is an abject failure of imagination and perseverance here and leadership. Because one president says we're going to Mars, the other one says we're going to the dark side of the moon, the other one says we're going to mine asteroids, the next one says, we're looking for Predator versus Alien and Star Wars crap. We have abdicated. Again, this was a great American story. It's what made America great. You want to wrap yourself in the flag. We were the first people on the moon. We did it. we did it in record time. Maybe there was some waste. And then what happened? But you know what? The waste, for the amount of money that it threw off in new innovations and products and everything else, it was great. We have suffered from a lack of leadership since then. It's become, what's my particular take on it? Instead of pure science, instead of reaching for the stars. And it upsets me. Honestly, it upsets me that we've
Well,
had to do this.
Alan, the way I think about it is there's 3 reasons you go to space. One is science. You do it for the science of it. Second, which is why we did, the Apollo missions, was strategic military control, right? Because Russia had beat us into space. And the third is commercialization. And it seems to me, certainly the third category is ripe for the Elon Musks and others, Bezos. Yeah, use that technology for that. I wouldn't want to plan on our strategic capabilities solely on commercial. I'd want to keep some of that back for NASA, and I want to keep all the science at NASA, because that's I think you said, Stephen, the failures, Columbia shuttle, disasters were people
That
making
happens.
bad decisions.
But Mitch, let me call out Columbia and of course Challenger, right? For the amount of missions, the amount of launches we've had, and to have had, there were actually 3. Apollo 1 was the other one where we lost lives. We've had 3 tragedies in 60 plus years of space. That is not a terrible, it's terrible if, God forbid, you or one of your loved ones is one of those people, but it's not a terrible record. Look, Todd Vernon, Mitch, Todd, right, from Legit and a bunch of Bradfeld companies. Todd was an ex-NASA guy. He worked on a lot of stuff there. There was a time where NASA's tagline was the best and the brightest, right? There were a lot of smart people who went to work in the government, but the smartest were at NASA, right? That was the best and the brightest. It's not anymore.
It may be. I mean, that's the thing, though. Let me kind of cut my legs off what I said earlier. It's not NASA's problem. I think NASA's doing great. I had the privilege of being one of the people selected for the annual visit to the Glenn Center here in Cleveland to visit. They invite in bloggers to show off what they're working on. Those are some smart cookies. That is a fantastic program. They're doing some incredible stuff. You look at Curiosity and Perseverance and the rovers on Mars. That's NASA. That's the NASA that I want to get behind. The problem is the bureaucrats come in and screw it all up. They make everything, like I said, these job programs, they try to funnel pork here and there. They change the direction. If you just let NASA decide what NASA should do, I think we would have a pretty cool space program. The problem is all these other people meddling with it. And to be honest, I see an opportunity here. Let's kind of bring this back to the point that Bonnie made, which is that the Hubble was so successful. One of the reasons, as we said, was because of that cool NASA stuff. Because people, they found a solution. They fixed the mirrors. They fixed the thrusters. They fixed the gyros. Well, unfortunately, Hubble is basically almost used up. She's coming down sometime between 28 and 2040, which is a pretty broad number. They did put a capture mechanism. They've talked about private things. But one of the things I want to point out is that one of the people that talked about a service mission to keep the Hubble operational is a private astronaut, a billionaire called Jared Isaacman. If you know that name, that's because he's Trump's nominee to lead NASA. That could actually be a good nominee, amazingly enough. It could be somebody who's going to lead NASA forward as more of a dynamic and solutions-focused organization that will do great things and so on. I mean, I don't know if we're going to be able to save the Hubble and service it and come forward, but somebody like that maybe will have the right priorities and maybe will get us back to the moon. And maybe will have us do some cool science. I think there's an opportunity for hope here. And frankly, having the SLS program canceled is probably the best thing that could possibly happen to NASA, because hopefully they can get back to what they do well, which is exploring space, instead of what they do poorly, which is creating expensive jobs and building expensive garbage that never flies.
Yep. Mitch, I liked your idea of, look, commercialize what needs to be commercial. Leave the science and stuff to NASA. Anyway, we're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang. Let's come back. Let's talk Wi-Fi 7, something a little less contentious. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back, and as Alan said, we're going to talk about Wi-Fi 7. Our friends here with Stephen Foskett at the Tech Field Day are doing a mobile field day kind of event. I think it's tomorrow, today being Tuesday, so it should be tomorrow. And we invite you to all check that out. But also there's an article up on techstrong.it about where we are with Wi-Fi 7 adoption. And Stephen kind of framed this for us a little bit. I feel like we were just at Wi-Fi 5 and now we're at 6 and then moving to 7. And I also am a little confused about, like, well, a lot of folks are skipping Wi-Fi and just going to LTE related technologies and maybe not using Wi-Fi at all. So what's going on here?
Well, technology just keeps advancing, doesn't it? And also, you missed 6E, which is probably the most important Wi-Fi that didn't get a number. So I gotta admit, so I am not the wireless expert that Tom and the Tech Field Day delegates are. But that being said, you know how everybody, if you ask a parent, which is your favorite kid, they'll be like, oh, I don't have a favorite kid. But then, if you push them, they'll be like, well, yeah, obviously it's this one. Mobility and Wi-Fi, wireless field day has always been my favorite nerd out Tech Field Day, because the delegates that come in are just from another planet in terms of knowledge and in terms of nerdiness and in terms of, I mean that in a very good way. I love these people. Yeah, they're from another planet. Well, they're also all radio and space science enthusiasts, which is kind of fun too. They're just a fun group to be around. Wi-Fi 7 is one of those interesting things. There's a lot of, I think, mixed reception even within the mobility community when it comes to Wi-Fi 7, because obviously it's the next generation of Wi-Fi. So every company is doing it. So you look and you've got companies, sort of the leaders out there like Cisco and Juniper and HPE and Arista. They're obviously going to be deploying Wi-Fi 7 access points. And Wi-Fi 7 has some stunning numbers. If you look at the throughput that it's theoretically capable of, if you look at the features that it has, I mean, one of the things that happened, again, 6E, was that we got 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi instead of just 2.5 and 5 gigahertz. We've now got a new band. Wi-Fi 7, my sort of layman's perspective on what the heck is Wi-Fi 7, it basically makes every device and every access point into a whole crew of devices and a whole crew of access points. It lets you combine multiple receivers, multiple bands, multiple everything in order to just stuff so much data across that wireless network. We already got to the point where, with Wi-Fi 6, where 1 gigabit per access point was not enough. We started having people deploy 2.5 gig as a normal thing to Wi-Fi access points, and 10 gig in some cases, or multiple 1 gig lines, multiple 2.5 gig lines. It's amazing that Wi-Fi has gotten to that point. But Wi-Fi 7 also has just so many cool technical aspects of it in terms of improving user experience, improving the quality of data, reducing retransmissions. If you love to geek out, I think that it's well worth reading more about what they're doing there, even if you don't really care about Wi-Fi. Because what you're saying is absolutely true, that there's companies looking at other technologies. I mean, already you've got, 5G, in your pocket. You've got private 5G. There's technologies like LoRaWAN, which is something that's really kind of gone under the radar, but has incredible range. People are building, whole like private networks on that. There's so much happening in this space, and yet Wi-Fi is still viable. It's still growing, and it's still important, even though it's sort of finding a new niche as sort of the high bandwidth local connector that's a complement to some of these other things that have longer range and better access through buildings and walls and all that sort of thing. So it's just a cool space. I'm sorry. I'm just getting nerdy about it. Somebody else get nerdy about it.
I'll get a little nerdy about it. I ran a lab that had an anechoic chamber that did product testing. I think it was back when it was Wi-Fi 5 was the latest back then, a while ago. And anyway, I think some of the interesting things about 7 is, one is really cutting down on latency. So for gaming and AR, VR kinds of applications over Wi-Fi, much more viable. But by also increasing the channel width from 160 to 320 megahertz, basically doubling, and also the QAM modulation's gone from 1K to 4K, which means you've got so many more states that can, so much more capacity, I guess is the best way to describe it, that you can handle across the radios that are being broadcast, including up to 6 gigahertz.
And you've also got contiguous channels now, which is another cool thing.
Yeah, exactly. And you can have higher device capacity as well as higher speeds. The speeds and feeds I always take with a grain of salt because, those are lab testing speeds, not real world speeds for most of us. But, lab testing speeds, it's going from like 9.6 to like 45, 46 gigabits per second. That's killing it. That's fast. So I think what this lets us do is not only deliver consumer services, but increase what's possible on corporate campuses, on military bases, in those environments, to be able to offer a much more comprehensive Wi-Fi experience and coverage.
So does this mean that I might not need as many extenders as I do to kind of make the whole Wi-Fi thing work, and then B,
extenders are evil. Stop. Okay.
B,
Yes.
do I no longer have to watch Alan messing around with the Wi-Fi in the company every other 10 days or so to fix them?
I am the IT Wi-Fi dude here.
It's true.
Well, first of all, Mike, you have to stop using 802.11a, which is a 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth, which is the same thing as the microwave in the office. So if you would switch over to a higher bandwidth,
either that or you've got to have someone stand on the microwave like this,
or just build a Faraday cage around the microwave.
But let me bring a dose of reality here to you two dreamers.
Oh, come on. Don't
I get that you're geeking out, and Wi-Fi 7 is amazing. So in my house, I run Orbi 6, and they now have the Orbi 7s, and I was very close to laying out a couple of $1,000 just because, for no reason, because I only have a gigabit internet anyway. Well, how fast am I going? But that being said, don't make fun of me, but I'm also the president of the HOA at our development. And we are we have a small development, it's 69 homes altogether. We don't have a development-wide cable internet provider. Everyone's free to do what they want, except that the only broadband that we could get right now is Xfinity. And because AT&T doesn't have fiber by us. So I am negotiating with a company called Hotwire that does communities. They will bring up to 10 gig fiber into every house in the neighborhood. They'll dig trench. They got fiber out on the main road. They'll dig trench. They'll bring fiber in. They'll put 2 Wi-Fi 7 routers or access points into every home.
Wow.
They'll give us 500 meg asynchronous, 5 up, 5 down. Base, 140 channels of HD TV. IP phone if you want a home phone for $85 a month.
What?
10-year contract. No brainer, I thought. Thank you, Mr. President. I delivered.
You did.
Well,
I did it.
I'm actually building that out myself at a community here in Hudson, as we've talked about before. We're doing HudsonCommunityLiving.org.
But wait, it gets better. I did a survey of our neighborhood to say, are you in for this? Because it's going to cost you $85 a month. The amount of people I've got, and blame it on Florida because we've got losers here. Florida men, they, like one of the questions was, what's your present internet speed? You know, what do you have? 72% don't have a clue.
Right.
I was going to say most.
I
would
don't
not
know. 72%.
The other,
What
the
do
other
you-
percentage
what do you-
say,
where
what would
do-
you do with 10 gig?
Where do you get your internet now? Good majority are getting Xfinity. T-Mobile is selling 5G in the house, where if you get a T-Mobile phone, they'll give you like a T-Mobile 5G modem, and you can then do your Wi-Fi over 5G with T-Mobile.
I
And
have
it's
that with
cheap.
Verizon.
Right. It's $30 a month, $40 a month, but no one can tell me how much that, you know, what the bandwidth is. It's enough. And so it breaks down to this. About half of my community is paying $250 or more a month for internet and TV.
Wow.
Because if you got the Xfinity full boat, that's what it is, about $270. The other half are paying $50 or less and don't want to do this. So is Wi-Fi 7 going to appeal to those people? Hell no. Hell no. It's just a non-factor. Yes, Mitch, your lab, you get all giddy about what you could do in the lab. Stephen, you're a nerd for this stuff. But I'm afraid that where rubber meets the road, people don't care.
I think it's more applicable to households with kids. When you've got 3 kids watching Netflix and
That
whatever
may be.
YouTube
That may
videos,
be. We
and
don't have a lot of
that's
households
where
with
you're
kids
gonna
in my
use this. You know,
little area there.
you and you know the family, you and your spouse sitting at home watching one thing is not going to make a big difference between 1 gig and 10 gig. And a matter of fact, even with Wi-Fi 6, you're going to be limited to half a gig over Wi-Fi. So you're not going to get it on your device.
And I'm gonna kick the kids out to the library anyway. So you know.
Well, to
I'd
me,
kick 'em
this
to
is
the neighbors
just
and
one
use
more
their
reason.
Wi-Fi.
Just one more reason to move out of Florida. If anyone knows of a year-round warm weather locale that I could keep my boat nearby, let me know.
Have you thought of Curacao?
I've yes.
So
Short
one
answer.
thing I'll say that kills me. So when I was a Unix sysadmin in the 90s, I remember when Windows sysadmins started appearing. And the problem with Windows in the data center was that everybody who'd ever used a PC thought they were a sysadmin because they had, oh, it's Windows. I can do this, to quote Jurassic Park, wrong. Wi-Fi is even worse. Every idiot thinks that they can run a wireless network because they've got a router. And the truth is, again, as I've learned from these people, the wireless field day delegates, the first thing they do is they look around when they walk into a hotel. They look around, they're like, oh, it's Ruckus in here. Oh, it's Cisco in here. Oh, it's Aruba. The funny thing is that they're basically Wi-Fi everywhere is configured almost entirely wrong, except for like this little tiny percentage of places. When you go to a place where it's configured right, it's transformative. So like we're building out Wi-Fi in this community that I'm working at. And one of the big fights that I had with the board to start with was they're like, we want great Wi-Fi or, great, service here. And so I said, okay, great. So we're going to have to lay cables. And they're like, no, Wi-Fi, what are you talking about? Well, Wi-Fi doesn't work without cables. So the first thing we needed to do was wire all the buildings for Ethernet. The second thing we needed to do was build a fiber loop around the community so that we could distribute high bandwidth. The board really thought, because, I use Orbi in my house, we can just use Orbi in the entire community. Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi. Well, that don't work, folks.
No,
What you gotta do,
if they have hot wire,
is
but you
cables.
look into it, Stephen, they bring fiber to every house.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're doing is we're building fiber In fact, I was working on that for 2 hours yesterday, terminating fiber in every building in this community, because from there, you can install wireless access points and it's going to be absolutely mind-bendingly good.
Absolutely. I
The
can't
problem
get
is
them to
most people's
understand
Wi-Fi
it.
is mind-bendingly bad, and they look at these ads and they say, "Oh yeah, right. I'm not going to get that kind of speed because my current one sucks." Well, maybe it
I think
sucks
you
because it's set
marketed the
up
whole
wrong.
thing wrong, Alan. You should have just led with, "We're putting an end to wimpy Wi-Fi and everybody get on board." Nobody wants wimpy Wi-Fi, even though they don't know what it is.
Maybe that's it. Okay.
The grandkids won't complain
These
when they
wimpy
come over.
Wi-Fis are criminals and everything else. We've got to, that'll play well in Florida. All right. Hey, let's call a wrap on today's Techstrong Gang. Whatever Wi-Fi you're using, you know, we didn't call out this past weekend was May 4th. Mitch, I thought you would come in as Yoda or something. May the force be with you.
Oh, I put up my costume. Darn it.
All right. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Actually, tomorrow we will have the Mobility Tech Field Day after Gang, so check that out. Of course, today we have another full Techstrong TV lineup, including, I guess, some of our RSA content from last week. We had a great RSA. So good seeing our community there. Until then, though, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong Gang. Have a great day, everyone. We're out.